Welcome to day 2 of Local Enterprise Week. My name is Brenda Hegarty and I am the Assistant Head of Enterprise in Leo, Donegal. Thank you to everyone for joining us this morning for our event which is focusing on sustainability and the circular economy. The theme of this year's Local Enterprise Week is Spring Back. When we were planning the schedule for the week, the themes of focus in the post-pandemic world were at the forefront of our mind. Leadership, resilience, sustainability, digitalisation, the need for startups, export growth and innovation. Businesses charting their way beyond the pandemic will need to consider how these themes can be embraced to sustain and grow. Yesterday, our opening event discussed the connection between resilience and building leadership and entrepreneurship. Today's focus is all about sustainability and the circular economy. And we're delighted to be joined by experts in the field, Caroline Pope and Dr. Declan Bogan. We will also have additional contributors, our Head of Enterprise in Donegal, Michael Tunney, as well as local businesses, Catherine Burke from Brackhouse and Kevin Eves from EnviroGround. At yesterday's session, Rosie Temple of McGee of Donegal talked about the importance of doing better business, focusing on core values. And this morning, our panel will be discussing how the traditional approach of take, make, dispose is giving way to a new way of thinking about the circular economy, so that goods that are produced are kept in circulation much longer. The panel will be examining how this movement brings opportunities for businesses to create value and safeguard the environment by improving the management of resources, eliminating waste through better design, and maximising the circulation of products, components and materials in use. This event will introduce small businesses to the concept of integrating sustainability and circular economy principles into their business to support sustainable growth. By reimagining products, packaging, services and experiences, it can bring benefits to your business, customers as well as the wider world. Applying these principles is fast becoming a necessity rather than a choice, helping to future-proof your business. Indeed, many progressive companies now regard climate change and the changes in their business as an opportunity rather than a threat. In the words of Mary Robinson, the former President of Ireland, now serving on the UN Special Envoy of Climate Change, a just low-carbon transition is a deep commitment which all businesses should take. I'll hand you over shortly to our first speaker and MC, but before I do, I want to take this opportunity to remind you that throughout Local Enterprise Week, we have a range of events that will inspire and guide you to embrace the changing world around us. And whether you're starting a new business or rejuvenating or expanding an existing one, Local Enterprise Office Donegal is here to help. Michael will later outline the specific supports that we have which can offer help and guidance as you transition to a more sustainable, circular economy focused business. This morning there is an opportunity to submit any comments or observation via the chat function, but any questions that you have for the panel that you would like to be discussed at the later panel session, please do type them into the Q&A function. And please do engage with us and get your comments and questions into us because the virtual event, you miss the physical interaction, and this is as good as it's going to get from a chat and questions point of view. So this morning, just in terms of the agenda, we are going to have Caroline and Declan give their expertise, and we're going to break for a short break at 10 to 11. We'll come back at 11 and our Head of Enterprise, Michael, will outline the supports that are available through the local enterprise office, as well as outlining our Sensei project. And I know some of our Sensei partners are joining us from across Europe, so you're very welcome this morning. We also have then our engagement with our two local enterprises, Kevin and Catherine, and that'll bring the reality of how the adoption of sustainability can happen. So thanks again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you online over the course of the week. Without further ado, I want to hand you over to our MC this morning, Caroline Pope. Caroline is a Senior Advisor in KPMG's Sustainability Futures team, and she's been based in Ireland now for over 6 years. So, Caroline, I'll hand over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Brenda, and welcome everybody. It's great to be with you today, and I suppose what I want to start with is often we hear the word sustainability, and it's interpreted in so many different ways. So I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes just introducing the concept of sustainability, what it means, and how we're defining it today. I'm going to share some slides with you now, and we'll go through them. There we go. That should be working. Excellent. So as I said there, sustainability has many different guises. And if you look on the left-hand side, corporate responsibility, CSR, corporate citizenship, these all appeared to be the responsibility of really big business. And it would have been under the hats of large PLCs and large corporates, global corporates. But the shift has come in the last couple of years, where increasingly with a massive SME market in Ireland, making up 70% of the Irish workforce, there's an equal role and equal impact to be made from smaller organisations as well. And the difference now compared to previously, where sustainability, CSR, perhaps would have been boxed as greenwash, or maybe it's a marketing tool. Now there are far clearer links and data that shows the correlation between sustainability and long-term business decisions and profitability. That's come out through a number of studies that are happening within organizations and within the markets as well. So which sort of organizations are returning to profitability quickest after the recession 12 years ago, or that are recovering very quickly post-COVID? All of these bits of data are coming together. But ultimately what this is saying, and I really believe strongly in the first point on the right, innovation, and further down, doing the right thing, business as usual. Sustainability really is about building resilience and flexibility. If we move on to the next slide now, just try and get that to move on. There we go. So environmental topics, although they're very important, and often we do resort when we talk about sustainability to talking purely about environmental topics. And when I talk about environmental topics, I mean water, waste, energy, resources, biodiversity and the natural environment. And linked to that is climate change and circular economy. As important as these things are, there is more to sustainability than this. And it does depend on the sort of business that you have. But importantly, I also want to reference there, as I mentioned on the previous page, sustainability has evolved a lot. And in the left-hand side, you see there what in the 1980s was called sustainable development. And this might be a term that people have heard quite a lot of, that it needs to be that we meet the needs of today without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, that was really a Platonic view on sustainability and sustainable development. Let's do what we can today and make sure we don't jeopardize the future. What we see now is much more a conversation about shared value, and that's on the right-hand side. And this is what has been conceptualized and brought into businesses where it may have been talked about in the past. It's really become the key definition of sustainability. Shared value is where you both create value for yourself, but without impacting or not even not impacting, but creating value for those around, whether it's economic or social value for those that are around. Now, what's really important in terms of the environment and the environmental element is what Brenda alluded to there, is climate change. Now, it's a really interesting topic, and it would be probably the one that's most talked about. If, for example, the Programme for Government has set a really ambitious 7% per annum decrease in carbon emissions over the next decade. Just to put that in context, 7% decrease is barely what we've even managed to achieve during COVID. It is a massive transformation of our energy system. It is a shift away from fossil fuels into renewable and low carbon technology, and with the infrastructure that goes with that. It's an exciting time, but it's also a daunting time for business. So what we want to talk about, myself and Declan, and then within the interviews that we have later on this morning, is how do you approach that? It can seem totally overwhelming. And when I show you the next page, it's probably going to feel really overwhelming, but it's very doable as long as you prioritize what's relevant to your business and that you put a euro sign against it. That's what it needs to drive. It needs to drive profitability or money saving. And those two need to be very, very central to any decisions that you make when it comes to sustainability. It's also, and I'll come on to this in a little while, it's also to do with decreasing risk and improving reward. I'll talk about some of those drivers in a little bit. As I alluded to there, it's not just environmental. And often, and more commonly, you now hear the word, or the acronym ESG, environmental, social, and governance, linked to sustainability. We talked a little bit there about environmental. The social and governance topics are equally important. They're equally important because they apply to different businesses, but they also are linked to, and it's often referred to as non-financial performance. And I don't fully understand why it's called non-financial. It's really pre-financial. All of these topics, whether it's around your training and development programs, your labor standards, your supply chain, diversity, your product safety, transparency, all of these topics, yes, okay, so they don't carry a euro sign with them, but they do ultimately affect your bottom line if they go wrong or if they go right. So let's talk about training and development, for example. If you have a large workforce, the better you can approach some of these social or training development topics, the higher your staff retention could be, the higher the morale, so that the more your workforce will want to be there and want to do a good job. The decrease in recruitment costs, ultimately increase in profit. Then there's the health and safety. I think many businesses that are probably listening today, if you have a workforce, health and safety is a bread and butter. But do you talk about it? Do you share how well you've done? Do you reflect on this with your customers, with your consumers, and do you make it a story? Because if it's not a good story, then it's a bad story, and that does get headlines or it does get recognized. So it's important to note that. And I put in that box there, commercial return and value drivers. Each of these has the potential to create value for your business, but you don't need to do all of them. As I say, it's a broad subject, and what you need to do is focus on those that are most important to you and bring you the best value. Then you can begin to add to it over time, and as you have resources and the time that's needed to commit to it. There are also quite a few certifications and bodies that can support in doing this. And we might talk about that with some of the panelists later. And if you have any specific questions, please ask them. And I'd be very happy to share anything on that. I've put in the bottom section of this slide, investors and government, because there really are different groups that address sustainability in different ways. The first top box was around business, but investors have become very active on the subject of sustainability in the last year, 18 months. It's now become something that they will automatically start asking when it comes to any lending or investment decisions. Pillar banks as well, the AIBs and Bank of Ireland, it's become a part of their organisations that they're setting commitments as a bank. We will back a sustainable transition, or we will only invest in 70% of our book will be green businesses or that support a sustainable economy. Making those statements means that they have to be underpinned by information. And that's what will happen across the SME market and across the business market, is the request for this sort of information by investors. So it's something to be aware of. You may not have been asked about it yet, but it could be something that may be coming up if you're looking to raise funds. So it's about preparing that good story that you can share with your investors along with some of the supporting data. If you're lucky enough to be an organization that is sustainable at the core, it's part of the way your business was and is, it's absolutely the culture that you are, then it should be very easy for you to tell that story. It is more difficult for companies that have perhaps operated in the more non-sustainable or brown sector that are looking to transition. But again, investors are understanding this more than they used to, and there is support out there as well. Finally, the government. So on the bottom right-hand corner there, some of you might be aware of this image. You might have seen it before, but these are the UN, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them, and they've been adopted by almost every government around the world. And they were adopted in 2015 with an ambition to achieve them by 2030. They set really strong targets. They set targets around zero. It's the broadest definition of sustainability. They talk about zero hunger. They talk about sustainable infrastructure. They talk about climate action. They talk about life on land, life underwater. It's a really comprehensive approach to sustainable development or sustainability. And governments and local agencies will refer to this. It's something that if you're interested, I would just have a look at them. If you want to build a program that links to some of these topics, there are a lot of indicators and targets that you can align to with that. It may just be that you're interested in it, and that's absolutely fine, and have a read because it's well explained. There's lots of webinars and interesting reads on it if you want to get some more background information. Just while I'm looking at this page, I often get asked the question, what is climate change? Why, we could all do with a couple of degrees warmer in the west coast of Ireland, and it could just, could do with a really nice summer. And the one thing that really resounded with me was, okay, we could do with a couple of degrees warmer, but imagine heating your body up by a couple of degrees and keeping it at that state. We're talking 2 to 4 degrees. It's not sustainable. We can't exist in a world like that. And that's what really brought it home for me a few years ago when someone explained it like that. Climate change, as much as 2 degrees or 4 degrees sounds quite pleasant, any organism can't sustain that sort of change. So that's where this is happening, this shift is being pushed. I want to talk here just very briefly about some of the drivers of change. Talk there at the top, the physical risk of change, specifically around climate change, increased weather events and the severity of those weather events, whether it's storms, flooding, whether it's drought, even affecting the agricultural systems. The frequency is increasing tremendously when it comes to this area, and that's having a knock-on effect with insurance costs. They're starting to price in climate risk. And that's something some of you may have experienced, you may not have, but it's definitely a driver of changing businesses to prepare. The regulatory side, it's less impactful on smaller businesses at the moment, but there is an increased cost, and it is becoming more complex. And where it might not directly affect you, certainly regulation will be affecting those suppliers or your buyers, your clients, if you're part of a global supply chain. Regulation will be upon them to reduce their emissions, and often you get asked those questions that come down through RFPs or tender submissions around your environmental footprint. Reputation is a really interesting one. Certainly with some of the companies we've worked with, and even our own organization, if there isn't a response to sustainability or climate change, it's really difficult to find talent and people that want to work with you and for you. So definitely with the younger generations, it's such an important part of their happenings and their days and what they believe in, that they want to work hard for organizations that have that same moral compass or sense of purpose. So that's become really, really interesting. And then I suppose I'll just jump to number 5 there, because it's obviously a very important one. Competitiveness. Ultimately, if you want to stay in competition, and sustainability is now becoming a driver of brand and competition. And without it, product obsolescence is occurring. And I know that Declan is going to go into specific case studies on some of these concepts and thoughts, so I won't go into them in a lot of detail, but I won't go into them now. But yeah, that you can ask further questions later. And as I wrap up here, just on the whistle-stop tour through sustainability, I want to leave you with 4 questions that maybe you can take away and have a think about over a cup of tea later. You know, the first question is, what value should sustainability bring your business? What do you want it to do for you? Do you want it to drive financial return? Do you want it to encourage an intake of different recruits? Do you want it to be a marketing tool? Do you want it to be able to open a whole new product option for you? What value should it bring? Do you have a clear understanding of how your customers and relevant stakeholders perceive this issue? This is probably the least talked about topic, kind of question, but probably adds the most value to your company. Have you asked your clients, your customers, your suppliers, your workforce, your investors, that group of stakeholders, have you asked them why, you know, what do you want to see from us when it comes to environment? What's important to you? How can we solve some of your problems? And through that, you build a stronger bond, you find out where you should focus your efforts and your money, and you understand the expectations. It's often a conversation that isn't had. Have you considered the strategic implications of emerging issues, the risks and opportunities? And some of the risks and opportunities were on the page before. So what physical risks are there to any of your assets? What regulatory change is coming down the tracks that might affect you? For example, a carbon price. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. It could work for you or it could work against you. And we'll talk a little bit about carbon credits if there's time. Where do you see misalignment between your commercial and sustainability initiatives? So where is there a clash between we're going to make money, but it's not going to be good for the environment, or it's not going to be great for society? Where's there a clash, and you know, which one should take precedence? And my key here is think longer term. And it's Unilever that really have brought this idea of longer term thinking into the regular cycle of things. Unilever decided, well, we want to change all our brands to be more sustainable. And Paul Polman turned around to his shareholders and said, I won't make you a good return. I may even lose you money in the next year or two, but stick with me for 10 years and I promise you will be a successful company and I will have made you far more money than I'm projected to now. And that's what happened. So it's just asking for a commitment and looking for the longer term. So how do you begin? I've just put 4 really easy points there down. Engage your stakeholders, identify and prioritize where to focus. Don't try and do everything all at once. And then gather some data and benchmark how you're getting on and communicate your success. I think it's really important to start telling your story and make sure that others can understand that and see it as well. So I hope that was a little bit of a whistle-stop tour through sustainability and just at a really high level talking to you about what it is and how to define it. I'm going to hand over to Declan now. He is Dr. Declan Bogan. He's going to take you into a lot more detail on circular economy and some case studies there. Thank you very much, Declan.
Thanks, Caroline. I hope you can hear me. Yep, we're good. It's a very difficult task to put sustainability and do it justice in 15 minutes. So congratulations. It's not a it's daunting in itself to be able to achieve that. So look, thank you very much. What we'd like to really focus in on now for the next half an hour is, and I'd love to be in Donegal, I believe it's sunny up there today, is focusing on the circular economy and take one element of what Caroline spoke about around sustainability, but take the circular economy as a mechanism for us to be able to drive our climate change ambitions, to keep our temperatures down to the Paris Agreement of 1.5 and even less. Decarbonisation of our businesses will get us so far, but the circular economy is the next stage on, the additional piece that we now need to layer into our thinking of how we're going to really drive sustainability in our business. So I'd like to thank Michael and Brenda and Caroline for the opportunity to speak to you all today. I would like to be in Donegal. I'm in Meath, and I feel like I'm in Donegal. So I've got a photograph behind me that was taken up at John's Point a number of years ago. But let me focus in on circular economy and our perspective. So my name is Dr. Declan Bogan. I am the founder of Innovate to Zero and founder of SUSTUB. SUSTUB is our training business where we provide skills to organizations and leaders in sustainability and carbon footprinting, in the ESG reporting, in the circular economy, and in design thinking and sustainability. So I specifically personally work in sustainability, in strategy, in innovation, and in the future of work. And please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn should you wish to connect. So I love Buckminster Fuller. He says some fantastic quotes, but one that I like in particular is the purpose of our lives is to add value to the people of this generation and those that follow. And if you identify what your purpose is in your business, and if your purpose is to be able to leave a legacy, a positive legacy, sort of, then it's a great place to start from whatever you're working on, whatever industry you're in. You start to realize, and as we make our way through the presentation, that the circular economy is applicable to all sectors and all businesses in those sectors. You know, sort of equally so, there is not just the climate impact and benefits, there's financial, there's process, there's customer and employee engagement, and there's innovation opportunities, thinking with a circular mindset. So over the next 25 minutes, we're going to go into a little bit more detail on that mindset, on some of those applications, some Irish case studies, and sort of you realize that the circular economy is not a new thing. It's a convergence of so many other business models and areas that ultimately leads to a circular economy. But it's that convergence piece that gets lost. So people go, oh, circular economy is something new. In fact, it's us using that mindset to rethink our own businesses. So circular centricity. What are the secret sauce, the DNA of the circular economy? And Brenda mentioned this earlier on. We've lived in a linear economy, and we're victims of it. And it's what we're familiar with, that we take, we make, we use, we waste. So we're digging stuff out of the ground and it's ending in landfill. You know, the recycling economy, which is slightly a step forward, not quite, because you'll see it later on how it fits into that shift from linear to circular. Take, we make, we use, recycle, we make, we use, recycle, we waste, and ultimately, in many cases, a lot of it gets wasted. Very little of it actually gets recycled. If we switch completely to the circular economy, we have this sort of continuous cycle of products and materials moving round and round and round that never end up as waste. So it's in infinite use of the resources. So in our circular economy systems, we keep our products, our parts and components of their highest utility and value for as long as possible, forever ideally. We keep resources within the economy when a product has reached its end of life. We give products a second life, a third life, a fourth life, etc. We use regenerative energy sources. We turn our waste into raw materials by recirculating them. In fact, we ban the word waste. Waste is a resource. It's in the wrong place. We call it waste, and our mindset is waste. Call it resource, generates value. And our industrial systems are restorative by design, not depletive. An equally important consideration for any business is that we can apply the circular economy at a process level. It's the easiest place to start. There's raw material, there's waste management. What are we doing with the process that how we manufacture or the services that we deliver? At a product level, there's a higher degree of innovation needed, maybe new partners, thinking longer life cycles. At a business model level, we're actually changing the paradigm of our business, of how we engage with customers and how we generate revenues, our processes, the whole system changes of our business. It's harder to implement. There are bigger leaps that need to happen psychologically. Or systemic innovation, where we need to change the system. And the biggest impediment to the circular economy is full system change. So we need to perhaps step back until we can get system change. We need to transition, though. Ultimately, the system needs to change for the benefit of the circular economy. In Ireland, approximately 2% of our economy has embraced or is circular. It's a tiny fraction of the 100% that it could be. In the global average is about 8.6, 8.9%, which is still not great. So we're laggards internationally in terms of circular economy in Ireland. We have a chance to embrace this insight to drive circular economy. For us to be able to meet our Paris Agreement standards and targets over the next number of years, we need to double in globally, go from 9% to 18% to have that climate change impact at scale. And obviously Ireland needs to ramp up very quickly. And I mentioned this earlier on, that the circular economy sector considerations, that it does apply in retail, in our supply chain transparency, in our relationships, in eliminating wasteful practices, in our greenhouse gas emissions, in our packaging, in services, in green services, and product as a service, waste and employee engagement, circular energy and utility, circular procurement, in manufacturing, how we energy and water, cradle to cradle, supply chain sustainability, materials sourcing and recovery, waste elimination, plastics, in construction around procurement, resource recovery, net zero emissions buildings, in food and farming, regenerative, biodiversity, food provenance, waste and pollution. The circular economy is both technological and biological, so we need to think of all of these things are connected and circular. So it applies across all of these sectors and businesses. But what's the fundamental? What's the DNA that drives the circular economy? What mindset do we need to bring to bear when we're looking at our own products, services, experiences, our business models, the systems that we operate in? There's some relatively straightforward thinking that ultimately will help us design better and better interactions with our customers, sort of drive value out of our products and services. So there's 5 that I'd like to go through over the next couple of minutes. So number 1, we need to have a zero mindset. Might sound kind of, what's this? We need to think of none, zero, free, nothing, self. When we think of zero, we think of there's no more resources are needed. It's free energy. It's free from X. It's zero to landfill. It's net zero. It's nothing goes to waste. There's no single-use plastics. You'll see this language coming through in businesses, communications, in policy. This is ultimately what's driving this change in the circular economy. These are seismic sort of shifts that have been happening for a number of years that you'll see in the language. And this is what this means. It's a principle of the circular economy. It's under the surface. It's the DNA of the zeitgeist to change. And if you look at a simple example as the zero waste cookbook, so nothing goes to waste. Nothing gets dumped. Brewdog, who just become a B Corp recently, I said they're not going to waste any beer or anything from the process. They're going to use it to make something else. No cans will get wasted. They will use it for other products. So 2 very different types of businesses, one in food, one in drink, but they're using this thinking in how they then come up with ideas for the circular economy. Number 2, think infinity. All of, 100%, fully, everything, always, infinite. Using those words, you start to see there's infinite material and product life cycles. There's markets for all our materials. We have all the resources we need. It's fully regenerative. All waste is a resource. We are all part of the solution. You start using these words in your product meetings, in your R&D meetings, in your leadership meetings. It gets you to a different place. It forces you to think very differently. And if you look at businesses, this is Timberland's example, and they've committed to having a net positive impact on the environment by 2030. You start to read their literature, they're saying design all their products for circularity, meaning 100% of materials in each product can be reused in a closed loop to make future products. Source all natural materials from farms practicing fully regenerative agriculture. Invest in regenerative agriculture, increase their positive impact. Recycle all materials that haven't been recycled yet. Inspire all the rest of the apparel industry to follow suit. So you can see they're using the language of infinity in their thinking and in their branding and in their stories and how they engage with the customers and engage with the markets. Number 3, be more like nature and biology. And we talked about biodiversity. Caroline mentioned it a couple of minutes ago. We need to begin to view nature not for what we can extract or harvest or domesticate, but for what we can learn. We've taken enough out of the planet already. But we can learn, and using the concept of biomimicry, there are technologies out there and solutions out there. And if we use these concepts from nature, like nature runs on sunlight and gravity and only uses the energy it needs. What can we do? How can we learn from that from our business? In the living world, there is no landfill. Materials flow. Everything is biodegradable. Nature banks on diversity. If we have a monoculture or a mono-system, we lose the opportunity to expand our thinking, to bring new insights. Nature demands local expertise and only works with what is locally available. So we don't have to have these global supply chains. What can we find locally? What can we use within our ecosystem? And there's lots of other examples of this, but water is the primary solvent. No complex chemical toxic catalysts. We just use natural enzymes. So how can we remove the pollutants, the toxins from our process? How can we rethink what we do? So learn from nature. This is a lovely example I came across of biomimicry in action, where bird strikes of large buildings and windows can be solved by putting a ultraviolet a spider web on the outside of the glass that we can see through, but birds see it because it reflects in UV. And suddenly, using biomimicry to learn, and suddenly the bird strikes drop 90%. So we can use this for our inspiration. Number 4, we need to think in systems. We need to separate it out in time, before, during, and after, and in space at a subsystem, system, and supersystem level. If we think about a bottle of milk or a tray of milk as an example, as a system, we need to think about the before, the land that it's used, seeds that we grow, the water, the energy that goes in, the map, where's our land, the materials, the bottle, the milk, the grain storage, any lids, and after. We need to think about this at a system level, the cattle, the energy, the farmers, and afterwards, when it's been used, the waste, the municipal workers that need to take the bottles away, perhaps. And at a super system level, what's going on at a farm level, in a factory level, so when we're processing this, what's happening in our shops, in our homes, in our groceries, in the trucks that we transport it in, what happens when it's after being used, in landfill, in reprocessing, in factories, where's the data, where's the information? You start to realize there's so many places we can innovate across our system. If we just focus in on one box in the middle, in the glass bottle of milk or the carton, we lose lots of opportunities to innovate. And we can use zero thinking and infinite thinking and nature to change the system. So this systems thinking enables us to think holistically, both in time, before, during, and after, and in space, subsystem, system, and supersystem level. Systems thinking. You need to think along the entire supply chain and the total system. When we look at it, we need to think about what's our proposition. This is a sort of a simple way of illustrating what's our offerings, our core products, our extended products. What's the experience we create? How we engage our brands, our channels, and our services. How are we configured? What's our profit models and cost models, our networks, our structures, and our processes? We need to think holistically of our proposition across these various areas. We may already have a product in our portfolio, but how do we change the profit models? How do we change that relationship with our customers? The engagement and the our branding and our services around that. What structures and networks do we need to bring to bear when we think about the new products and services and experiences that we want to bring that are more circular? If we just look very narrowly at what we do without considering all of these other areas, we'll miss a trick on being able to achieve our goals in the circular economy. Because when you go back to the proposition, you realize that in the circular economy, it's new thinking we need. There's lots of models out there that are already being applied in the circular economy that we don't necessarily think are circular economy or that it can apply to us. But if we use this thinking, it brings us to a better place. So the top 5, and there are others, but sort of the top 5 are the sharing platforms, product as a service, product life extensions, resource recovery, circular supplies. And when you look at some Irish businesses in this space, the likes of sharing platforms, they stimulate collaboration amongst users. There's Collect, New, Zeus are providing sort of sharing platforms. Product as a service, you've got Urban Volt, you've got Dublin Bikes, you've got GoCar. Product life extensions, you've got Condor, which I came across recently, which is giving pre-loved children's toys and buggies and products like that a second life, a third life. You've got circular supplies, you've got the likes of Hexafly, which is taking spent grain from one process, breeding black soldier flies, turning those into protein that are used for the fish industry in a regenerative building, using regenerative energy, at least renewable energy, to power it. So there's no waste. There's 6 products out of dead flies and spent grain. And the resource recovery. So the likes of Dowman or Bounce Back or Mimergy are taking previously used products or grass cuttings and turning them into a product of value. So there's lots of Irish businesses and examples and case studies that companies can tap into across this key area. And I mentioned earlier on that the circular economy is not a new thing. And you saw some of the examples there. You go even deeper into it, we have the linear economy on the left-hand side and the circular economy on the right-hand side here. And we said take, make, use, and dispose, and that's sort of very linear. When we look at the useful application of materials, we can get to the level of recovery. But that's really, it's a cop-out. We're going to incinerate the materials with energy recovery. It's more linear than circular. And people feel that, I'm recycling more, but that's much more linear than circular. Where processing materials obtain the same or lower grade. The challenge for the recycle industry is nobody wants the material. They don't have the hassle of processing it, but we need to find technological solutions to turn this recycled material into as good as virgin material, or to find new ways and new applications for this material. So we need to find useful application of materials. We need to extend the lifespan of products and materials, and this is where you'll start to recognize we need to repurpose things. Discard a product or its part into a new product with a different function. We need to remanufacture things. We need to refurbish things, repair them, reuse them. So you start to the concept of fixing your car is the circular economy. If you look at the total system, it's only one small element of it. We need to think much more holistically across how do you make a car circular. So this is one element of it, but we need to think much more broader. So you need to extend the lifespan of the products and materials so they have a first life, a second life, a third life, a fourth life, as we said earlier on. And the third one then, we need to use smarter product use and manufacture. This is where we need to increase efficiency of product manufacture use by consuming fewer natural resources, so we're having less impact. We need to rethink, we're going to look at that in a couple of moments, to design products to be used more intensively through sharing products or putting multifunctional products in the market, or to refuse to use them, make product redundant by abandoning its function, offering the same function with a radically different product. And then you're getting much more to the circular economy. So we need to disrupt ourselves. We need to transform the products we have and the solutions we have and the services we have with this circular mindset of zero infinity, new models, not new thinking. So new thinking, not new models. Thinking they're using nature, thinking in systems. That will get us to the circular economy. If you look at Irish companies I mentioned earlier on, there's sort of something as simple as, this was an ad I saw on LinkedIn, Larkin Engineering, 22 refurbished litter bins, giving a new life to a product. Why not? There's value in it, there's inherent value in it. Company in Galway that sort of, but this was available in the 1950s in Ireland and before, where you could actually bring your empty containers and refill them. We're seeing it. This is the circular economy in action, just sort of brought up to a modern day. And I mentioned about rethinking, and people will be familiar with the concept of green design and eco design, sustainable product design, design for sustainability, transformative design. And if you're not, it's green design is you make your products greener. It's a small step towards the circular economy. You're changing some of your product. It's better than the linear economy, but it's only one step. We get into eco-design, we're getting into much more broader life cycle assessment. So we're designing services, processes. We get into sustainable product design, we're getting more into the social fairness. So you're bringing the who's making it, where are they making it, are they being paid properly to build these and make these products, as well as the product side of things. When you get into design for sustainability and circular design, you're thinking much broader on services, systems, environments, materials, objects, visual communications, policies. There's a much richer ecosystem of things to think about. Transformation design is ultimately where we need to be in the circular economy, where we're changing behaviors, we're driving adoption, we're driving how we engage our customers and our suppliers, and our customers become our suppliers, and our suppliers become our customers. We're changing everything, how you buy stuff, engage stuff, use stuff. Because when you design for the circular economy, you need products to be maintained in tip-top condition. They can be separated and reassembled easily. They can take wear and tear. You create products that will be loved, liked, or trusted for longer. They allow for future expansion and modification. They fit with other products as well. So if you have designers on your team or you engage with external partners in this space, they need to be using these principles in design to drive the change, to think differently about that this product will be around forever. Imagine using I'm going to design a product that we will never get rid of. There will be a use for all of the raw materials, all of the product in some type of form forever. We don't need to mine stuff anymore. We need to use the concept of urban mining. There's so much material out there that is just in the wrong place. And if you look at, examples, this is sort of, it's in every industry, whether it's in the coffin industry or in the bread industry, or I love the example from the London Marathon a number of years ago. So instead of giving people plastic bottles, they gave them a ball of water in a seaweed edible sort of outer skin. There's no packaging, zero packaging, no bottles, 100% sort of edible solution. Suddenly there's thousands and millions of plastic bottles no longer needed. It's rethinking using this concept. What can you do to get started on your journey? This is a challenge that we were always asked in business. And we work with very large corporations, and we work with micro businesses of 1 and 2 persons. So there's that spread across multiple sectors. What can you do to get started? I think it's 5 steps. And I know Caroline mentioned 1 or 2 of these earlier on, but you need to understand the total life cycle of your product or service. Identify the touch points, the lost value, the system it operates in. You need to ban the word waste on those touch points. It's a resource. You need to switch to at least as a minimum to 100% renewable sources of our energy. So we're not depleting coal and peat and oil and gas. There's free energy from the sun. There's wind, there's wave. On the coast of Donegal, plenty of wind up there. We need to pick and run a pilot project on a process or a product, or a service, or a new business model, or the system, if you're brave enough to sort of challenge the system. You have to use the principles of zero thinking, infinity, systems, new thinking, not new models, learning from nature, and the 10 Re's, circular Re's, the refuse, rethink, remanufacture, repurpose, repair, etc., as inspiration. And then we need to design for circularity using that thinking across all of our offerings in the market, across our total proposition. You need to talk to your suppliers and find out how circular they are. Are they impeding you? Are they enabling you to be circular? If you're in the product space, what packaging are you using? Where's it from? What's its provenance, and where does it go after it's been used? Maybe you need to switch suppliers. Then you need to talk to your customers. And if you go on, and there's some nice examples on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. There are some nice and simple tools that you can download. You need to map out your circular business model canvas. And I know the Leos can help with that, and Michael's going to mention that after the break, what's involved in that. We need to be proactive and drive the change, to build your story, identify the value opportunities together with your customers. I'd love for you to see you building your brand circular story. What is your story? Because I believe sort of as actors and creators of circular solutions, we can't just simply respond. We need to be bold and shape and move our consumer demand in the right direction. We need to be the change makers. We need to drive the behavioral change. Because if it's not you, then who's going to do it? We missed this chance. We're never going to get another chance like this ever again. And if it's not now, then when? Because it's not an individual event, it's a team sport. We all need to be part of this journey to the circular economy. Thank you very much. Hope that gave you a rich insight. I think Caroline's going to send you off for coffee now. Thank you very much.
That was brilliant, Declan. Thank you so much for that. I found it really fascinating. And I think the bit that I found the most interesting was that you were able to give Irish examples for those 5 different ways of thinking of circular economy, whether it's a sharing platform, product as a service, product life extension, circular supplies, or resource recovery. So it is really happening. It's happening in the economy, anywhere around us, in all different sized organizations. So perhaps you can share that with the group later. But that was fantastic. So now we're 3 minutes over. I'm not going to keep you from the caffeine hit any longer. Perhaps we can regroup at 11 o'clock and everyone can have a break now, and we'll be back online at 11, starting with Michael, and then we'll go through different interviews with the 2 different organizations that we have. Thanks very much, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you managed to have your tea or coffee, anything just to keep you going. I would now really like to introduce you to Michael Tunney. So Michael is obviously probably known to most of you, but he's the head of enterprise at the Leo in Donegal. And he's going to talk to us now about green supports that are available for small businesses and the Cincy project. So Michael, I might hand over to you there. I think you're in the studio with Brenda.
Good morning, and thank you, Caroline. Thank you folks, and thank you, Declan and Caroline, for the great insights before on sustainability and the green and the circular economy. Just before I get into the supports from the local enterprise office, I might just outline some of the policy context in which the local enterprise offices are operating now with regard to these topics. I'll first mention the OECD report of 2019, and that has got a lot of coverage and a lot of response by government and by our government department, which is the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. significant focus there was on competitiveness. But when you read the report, it's primarily, if not solely, around financial viability and sustainability of small businesses. Again, identified as a key weakness within small business in the Irish economy, their management capability in relation to financial viability. Very little, I think myself when browsing through the report, no reference to environmental sustainability. Flip that on then, government set up an SME task force to look at the OECD recommendations, and that task force reported December just of last year. And it describes itself as an ambitious long-term strategic blueprint for Irish SMEs and entrepreneurs. So it looked at competitiveness, it looked at internationalisation, it looked at entrepreneurship, digitalisation, network and clustering. And it had a lot of recommendations around policies and supports associated with those headings. But it also had in there a reference to the climate change, challenges and opportunities for SMEs. But interestingly, it is about 4 pages. It has no recommendations, no suggestions around policies or supports, no reference to the circular economy, a little bit of reference to sustainability and how and about, I suppose, achieving that zero target by 2050, and nothing around social enterprises in the area of the circular economy. So I think that to me, it was a gap. And then if I flick back a little bit, if you look online, there was a bit of research carried out by IBEC and the EPA back in 2018. And I think it was about 230 companies, primarily SMEs, but some of them very large. And it was supposed trying to gauge the level of awareness within Irish business around the circular economy and sustainability, and particularly the EU framework on the circular economy. I think less than 50% of the businesses had heard of the EU framework. Less than 50% saw the circular economy as an opportunity. Less than 10% had actually done anything and put any resources available to looking at this as an area of opportunity. And over 40% of them saw funding as a major challenge to drive this forward. So I think, to me, that kind of paints kind of a negative picture of where we might be policy-wise. And as Declan said, a lot of catching up to be done, I think, in the Irish economy and also within our business community. And some of those findings that IBEC and the EPA found merged some of the findings that we have found ourselves in the SINSE project. That's a project we're involved in with 7 partners across the European Union in Greece, Italy, Romania, Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria, and then ourselves in Donegal. And I know some of our partners are online this morning. We carried out that research at the start of the project on behalf of the partners, and it was really to gauge the level of awareness and knowledge within the partner regions, not only in the agencies who were taking part, but also the stakeholders that they had at local level. And it really demonstrated to us that there was a significant lack of awareness and an understanding of what the circular economy was. There was limited policies and measures in the various regions within the seven partner regions, so across 7 European countries. And there was a lack of knowledge, but also was, identified among many of the partners, a lack of case studies, good practices that we could actually draw on, and they could draw on and help to use those case studies to drive that change in mindset that Declan was talking about. So ultimately in that project, and that SINSE project, we're trying to, and I think it was very obvious from the presentation of both Caroline and Declan that they were linking innovation and circular economy, innovation and sustainability, both of them inextricably linked. Innovation was coming through on all of those. So that circular economy project we're involved in is about boosting innovation through engagement in the circular economy, and then driving the circular economy at local level through innovation, but also promoting entrepreneurship. Again, something that a key objective and role for the local enterprise office is promoting entrepreneurship at local level. So how can we, promote entrepreneurship within Donegal, looking at the circular economy and looking at that change in mindset and looking at some of the opportunities that Declan talked about. And ultimately, through that project, we would hopefully have an action plan that would become implementable over the coming years. And it's, as a result of our involvement in the SINSE project, we are now actually involved, myself and my colleague Maura Toner, involved in a cross-border group looking at the whole area of the circular economy. And again, it's primarily focused, I think, on waste. And I think if you look at a lot of the European policies, it's very much about that waste. And I know, Declan, we shouldn't be calling it waste, but it is about, you know, waste reduction, and the circular economy tends to be where it gets, the two get side by side. So in relation to supports from the local enterprise office in this particular area, I would just mention probably three in particular. The Green for Micro, again, first event of Enterprise Week this year, our Taoiseach and Minister for Enterprise Trade and Employment launched the Green for Micro programme. I think it was in Fingal Local Enterprise Office yesterday morning as one of the kick-off events. So a focus on how do we get more micro enterprises, the less than 10s, looking at the green agenda. And again, this ties in probably with that European Green Deal strategy and policy that they have there. But the focus on the Green for Micro is about improving environmental practices and achieving cost savings. I think, as you know, Declan highlighted there, you know, the issue there around, you know, to look at your energy as probably your basic thing. Look at your energy sources. How are you? Is it carbon neutral? You know, is it from renewable, 100% from renewables? And then look at what's the output and how can you reduce the outputs or the waste or the byproducts. And ultimately, I think for all small businesses, you know, for, again, like innovation is only good when it's implemented and adds something to the bottom line. So it has to have for small business, it has to have a bottom line. So that program consists of 2 stages. The first is 2 days consultancy. The consultant goes into your business, looks at issues around the green agenda, we'll use that term, and then provides you with after that audit is carried out, presents you with, I suppose, a summary actions, challenges, and what you should do. You can take that and seek to implement it, or you can then apply for a second stage, which is a further 3 days if you want to do more work and more in-depth analysis of that, or more detail of the recommendations. Or you can apply for a 50% grant up to 2,500 if you need to invest in some capital in relation to implementing some of those recommendations. So it might be, let's say, if you have a large factory and you have lots of lighting and you want to replace your lighting with a LED lighting or something like that, and there's a cost involved, or you want to replace maybe a heating system or some sort of extraction system or whatever, there's a small grant of 50% up to 2,500. So that's Green for Micro, and there are probably 2 variations of it in the border. There's a Brexit Green for Micro, which we're rolling out in the 6 border counties, and then there's a national one, and hopefully we can tip our hand in both tills for the business in Donegal. The second, I would just like to mention of the programme is Lean, because it's not dissimilar. Lean has been pushed significantly by the local enterprise office at national level in the last probably 5 years, because it looks at, again, the processes within a small business and how you can improve your internal processes, ultimately to increase or improve your bottom line. So that's looking at your raw material sources, looking at how, you know, looking at your stock, looking at your internal processes, and you know, we're saying for us in Donegal to try and drive this agenda around the circular economy and sustainability, we'll be asking our Lean consultants when they go in there to make sure they look at, you know, what's the energy inputs and what's the outputs and what are the waste outputs and how can those be reduced or looked at on a more sustainable basis. So Lean, again in Donegal, we have 2 models. One is consultancy. So that's just where we appoint a Lean consultant to go into the business to the value initially up to €5,000 of consultancy. So that's probably about 5, 6, 7 days. And there's a small fee of a couple of €100 for that. Or we have a program then where the owner managers actually attend a workshop and get an understanding about the Lean processes and what the consultant is going to do. And then there is the site visits with the audit and the recommendations. And you can apply for Lean more than once. So it is really looking at those internal processes when we'll be saying a strong focus on sustainability in particular. And then of course there is the standard mentoring, which again, if a business particularly wants to look at an issue around sustainability in their business, and they think Lean is maybe a bit too much, or they don't want to go through the Green for Micro, we can apply a mentor, a suitable mentor, and we now have a list of green mentors from Enterprise Ireland, and it's interesting all the time now we're getting applications from consultants and mentors wanting to be on our green panel. So we can appoint a mentor to go in if you have an issue around, let's say you want to look and say, look, I have a big building here, there's a lot of rainwater going off, how do I turn that into an asset? So mentoring is available, currently available free of charge, 100% subvented. So those are the three areas that I would focus on by way of supports at this particular time. But I think I would just say that from our perspective, we see an opportunity for businesses in Donegal, particularly because of our involvement in the food sector over the last 12 years. And I think there's been a lot of work around the green agenda, Origin Green, that national scheme that was operating for quite a while there, all around the sustainability of food. We've seen opportunities in that sector, and then some of that going into tourism. So we do think there is opportunities there for businesses, existing businesses and new ideas in this sector. And I would just say, as well as the supports, probably the first thing to do I would recommend to any business or anybody thinking about a business in this area is come and talk to us. We also are going to be recipients of further training in this area, so hopefully we'll get a little bit more experience as well and a little bit more knowledgeable. So that's it, Caroline, for the moment, and hand back to yourself.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Michael. That was really helpful, actually. And just so everybody knows, I know that Eileen and Moira are in the background there sharing all of the links in the chat function. So please make sure you click on those. It'll give you a lot more information on what Michael just shared. So thank you, Michael. And just to add on what you mentioned there, definitely there has been a skills gap in this area. And it's really great to hear all that you're doing it, that there is some funding. I know we're going to talk about funding and a bit of policy in the panel questions later. So thanks, Michael. I'm now going to move on to talk to Catherine Burke. So hi, Catherine.
Morning.
Morning. I'm really excited to talk to you about Catherine and to talk about Brack House. So I'm just going to give a little introduction and then I'll perhaps just move on to you to tell us a little bit more about what Brack House is. So Brack House is a modern retreat in North Donegal. It was opened in 2017 by yourself and Niall. And you had a vision really to connect visitors with the heritage and beauty of the local area, so up in Dunfanaghy. Central to the design was your desire to minimise your impact on the environment and the local community. So hopefully that's quite just a brief introduction, but maybe tell us a little bit more.
Sure, Caroline, thank you very much. Delighted to be talking on this subject this morning. As you say, we're a small luxury accommodation business focused on the tourism market, national and international, or at least international until the year that has just been. We opened in July 17, and I suppose our key objective, what drove the whole project, was the desire to bring a whole new group of visitors and audience to what we consider to be probably one of the most beautiful places in the world, and a very special place. And what we have tried to achieve is a crafted experience. So as I always say to people, one of the first things I do when people arrive is I bring them to a big window that looks out over Sheephaven Bay and Muckish. And I say to them, really, everything that you taste, touch, and experience during your time with us is largely going to come from where you can see. And that's been a really, really, really important part of it. So you spoke earlier about sustainability and what it means. And it means so many things to different people, and it's often just associated with the green agenda. We see it in the broadest sense of the word. So I suppose everything that we do is driven by our location. So we're on Hornhead, and we're looking out over Sheephaven Bay and Muckish and Errigal. So a location like this kind of demands a sustainable approach to business, has been our view on it. So we've taken that from the very beginning of our project, from the building through to the design of the guest experience, through to our food, our products, the businesses that we work with locally, our role in the community, our staffing. So we see that as just kind of the nuts and bolts of what we do every day, and indeed how we live, because I suppose this is our home as well as our business. So there's much more to it than just kind of a business agenda. To be honest, it's a way of life.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Catherine. Thanks. And I suppose one of the really key bits when we talked about this previously was that you actually retrofitted the property, and that I think is interesting. It's very easy to build something that's clean and green and operates really efficiently, but to do it in hindsight is really impressive. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I suppose this was really quite important to us. When we came to view what was then a small bungalow on this site back in 2014, I suppose there's a lot of people who would have stood here and said, knock it down and just start again. And to us, kind of that's the starting point for all of this, that you should really be trying to reuse as much of what currently exists. This was a perfectly fine house that was on the site. It needed a full upgrade. It needed all the energy stuff we'll be talking about. But there was nothing fundamentally wrong with the house. It was in a beautiful location. It needed extensive work and extensions and all of that to do what we wanted to do. But we certainly weren't in bulldozer mode when we stood here looking at it. So that obviously presents its challenges. Of course, it is easier to build from scratch and to put in everything anew. But that, to be honest, was really... became a really great learning experience for us, and indeed I think for a lot of people involved in the project, because it is more difficult, no question about it.
Definitely. And was there any supports or anything that was able to help you to do that? I mean, we are talking sort of 10 years ago, so it was a different world at that point.
Yeah, I suppose that has been evolving all the time. When we started doing this, we had some knowledge, but we to learn on the fly like everybody else. There was lots of pockets of support. So as a business, obviously, even 5-6 years ago, there would have been accelerated capital allowances available for some of the capital fit out.
Yeah.
So things like the the lighting, all of the high rating materials that went into the house, be they machines, lighting, air source pumps, indeed the electric vehicle charging point, all that sort of stuff. There are things that can be done for that. So, and that has got even better over the last couple of years. So if we were doing this today, there would be even more supports available. So people should keep that in mind, that before you kind of launch into something like that, just have a dig around and see what is available.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I mean, even there, Catherine, you've listed off some of the amazing technology that you have. So, you're talking about the air source pump and different things that you have there. So it shows that you've really taken it to. Are you net zero? That's a tricky question.
It's a really good question. Like a lot of these things, the magic is in the measuring. So when you go to start a business like this, you're focused on getting the doors open. Then you're focused on all of the inputs. So you can imagine, even when we started first, we weren't expert at managing some of the inputs that we need. So water, wonderful example of this in a tourism business, where you've significant peaks and troughs in your usage. We have got immeasurably better at that since we began. When we began, we probably felt, that we needed piping hot water every minute of every day to satisfy our guests. We now know through communication with our guests, through the management of that we can actually reduce by very, very high percentages some of those costs that are associated with running a business like this. So that is evolving. We are measuring all the time. We are, it's become slight fixation. I would.
That's brilliant.
But we're getting there, and it's amazing. We're only open since July 17. That was a short season. Obviously, last year with everything that went on was a short season, but we've made massive progress in that time.
Yeah, it's been a tough time, Catherine, and I really hope it all opens up soon. I mean, we'll definitely be up to visit. There's one question that I have just to finish us off, because it does lead on quite nicely from where you were saying the measurement side, and something that I think probably in the tourism industry, maybe even more than lots of other industries, is standards and certification, to say you truly are green or you really are excellent, and that it isn't a hoax or a subpar standard. How have you found that sort of area, and where do you want to try and hang your hat to show excellence and progress?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, because again, 5-6 years ago when we were looking at this, there was a myriad of different agencies and global standards, and we just decided, we need to do what we think is right first, and get our processes right, and then we would look again. So in the last 12 months, we've been working with Sustainable Travel Ireland, and we're now kind of at intermediate membership level with them. And our objective would be over the next period of time, probably a year or two, to move our way up through the certification process there and get to gold standard.
Great.
Largely because we just think it's very important to us to kind of show what we're doing and show it in a really tangible way, but also from an Ireland tourism perspective, we actually think there's a really big opportunity there for Ireland, and particularly for Donegal, to really show off a little bit and show the way,
Yeah. Great. I mean, there is one specific question which I'll save for later, but it came from Edward, and it's really, and I'll leave you to think about it because we'll just move on to talk to Kevin now. But it's how can small villages and towns embrace sustainability, and how can they do it? Because you've done it yourself as a small business in a small community, but perhaps how you've interacted with some of the villages around, and how any suggestions you have there. So I'll leave it with that. And Catherine, thanks for your time. We'll have you back in a few minutes for the panel, but hopefully that gave everyone a good flavour. Thanks a lot. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Caroline. How are you?
Hi. Yeah, very well. Welcome. It's good to speak to you. It's looking a little sunnier there than it was earlier this morning.
Yeah, no, definitely. Still hiding indoors at the minute, so outside.
You'll be out soon. Kevin, thanks very much for joining us. And for those listening, Kevin runs EnviroGrind, which is based up in Pettigo. Basically, EnviroGrind is a waste recycling company and a supplier of horticultural products like compost, bark mulch, wood chip. R&D has been critical to the success of the company, and finding a solution for traditionally difficult waste streams, coming back to this concept of circular economy. They found that through innovation, which has enabled the business to grow internationally over the last decade. So really, the first question for you, Kevin, is can you give us a brief background to EnviroGrind and where it all began?
Yeah, no problem. Well, so EnviroGrind at the minute is really broke up into two sectors. There's a horticultural business which processes and sells compost, wood chip, bark mulches. The other side's an organic waste processor. So it's basically broken into three subdivisions. We're basically composting bio waste, such as food waste, brown bin, garden and park waste, even fish waste from the likes of Killybegs processing plants. Stuff like that there. There's a wood waste. We accept wood waste onto the site, mainly from skip collectors coming from construction sites, house red-outs, everything. They source segregate it, and we turn that into a biomass or else a horticultural product. And then we have a plasterboard recycling division that is basically using gypsum-based materials from construction and demolition as well. And that goes back into the remanufacturing of plasterboard or goes to the cement industry. So really the company was set up by my parents, Martin and Mary, back in '97. It's very much a family business. They're still in the business, and myself and my three brothers work in the business full time.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's grown internationally as well. So you've had a busy time. Yeah,
no. So the gypsum side of things did expand out, and there was a couple of plants built in Europe, but it really where it kind of spawned off then in '97, my father would have set it up kind of doing horticultural products and kind of evolved it into a mobile shredding and screening company, which kind of led till having mobile equipment in the Sandaban, the plasterboard factory down in outside Kingscourt in Cavan. Kind of after a number of years of kind of processing down there, and as the factory wanted to move away, they were more or less back then processing, shredding and landfilling the waste from the factory. They kind of decided to move away from that and kind of try and create a product which kind of goes back into the remanufacturing of board. And in that, they designed a bespoke line to basically do that. And at that time, it was kind of new. So it kind of ended up evolving out into that technology. There was a plant built in Australia, there was a plant built in Switzerland, France, Germany, and the one in Kingscourt we still operate today.
A massive success story, and I see you're getting a shout out here as well that you're part of the CINCI program. So you've been a case study on that, or certainly joined it. So people online might nice to put a face to a name. So that's great, and we might have questions that come from the group that are listening later on. But I suppose traditionally your business is put in a sustainability or a green bucket because of what you do and the way that you operate. But what about any other sustainability initiatives that you've tried to bring into the business? Any sort of programs that you've set up or things that you've looked at in the environmental, and if you do anything in the social, anything there as well?
Yeah, well, we want, I suppose, all our products, being that it's mainly organic products we do. So say they're even sustainability on site. Like at the minute, we're going through an infrastructure upgrade on even the likes of things like that, like our power supply, so that we can move away from, say, using a diesel generator. Some of our we're kind of moving away from maybe more mobile equipment to more electrical equipment. And even at the minute, we're installing a new compost system that basically in our in-vessel compost plant, to basically like a SCADA system that'll better, it'll operate more efficiently, basically with the controls. We can set parameters in our aeration and our temperatures of our compost basically, and the fans will kind of work to control and kind of optimize that process. Where before that, now the system we have, it's more like a time. The operator's basically setting up times for fans and stuff to be operating and running on the site. Rainwater harvesting we would have in the summer months have a high enough consumption of water, because basically the composting process, we need to have enough air and water to kind of allow the microbes to kind of break down. So we're kind of better rainwater harvesting, using that there back in our own washing facilities. Even some of the infrastructure we're doing now, we're kind of moving away from, say, maybe trucks having to come into a dirty area. They're going to tip into pits that will be less use of water, washing and cleaning and dirt, and then less even hassle for us having to process and handle that dirty water. So there is a lot of things like that there that we have looked into wind and solar, and we have done feasibility studies on that, and it's just not really stacking up at the minute. But that thought process is all there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I suppose the question there, just to try and make sure that what I've put in my presentation is actually being lived, and contradict me if I'm wrong, but did you do those things because they add up, because financially they make sense, or was it for any other reason, marketing, you were asked for it? Or
hey, there's probably two sides of it, but it's financially and even compliance. I suppose we're heavily regulated, and rightly so, but it's just better processes, better efficiency, better cost. Like even that compost system, it's a high enough outlay to invest in it, but we know we'll have the return on the product, and the efficiency, cost, and electric handling, washing, water process, electric intensive. It's all that. It's just modernizing the site and making it as green as we possibly can, which is cost effective too, mainly.
Yeah, and data seems to be key there. So making sure you know what's going in, what's coming out, how much you're using at any point in time, and just being efficient.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. So kind of reflecting on all of that, what are you most proud of in terms of the actions you've taken?
I suppose what we're pretty proud of, that everything we do is everything we take in that is a waste. And I suppose going back probably going back a term like that would have been once going to landfill, like everything we take in becomes a product, be it wood waste, gypsum, brown bin, it all goes back out as a product. There's very little, I'd say 2% of what probably comes into our site goes out, as a waste. And that's nearly simply from contamination of brown bin, people wrongly putting a plastic bag in the bin. We have to try and pick and clean that out of it. And we have but it's fractional compared to what we take in. But everything we take in becomes a product, and you're kind of going into that upcycling where what's a waste is now a product.
Yeah, brilliant. And on the flip side of that, I suppose helpful for the audience to know, if you're happy to share, what's been the most challenging bit of it all.
I think we still have kind of constant challenges. I suppose where we're located, we're in South Donegal. It's not highly populated compost. Like it kind of relies on domestic collections. Like if you take Donegal, for example, like I'd say Donegal as a whole probably collects and processes maybe 1,500 ton of brown bin organic waste a year. If you compare that to, say, Northern Ireland, like say from Annanoma district right beside us, which is just domestic collections and their commercial drop-off, your garden waste. Like from Annanoma has a population of 115,000 people, and they're creating 9,000 ton of bio waste without their commercial, not including commercial, where you take Donegal with 157,000 people, they're only collecting and processing maybe 1,500 tonne. So there's kind of an educational thing where Southern Ireland still is kind of a poor thing to segregate and use brown bin and kind of implement brown bin and stuff like that. It's kind of a constant struggle where we're probably collecting from a wider area or traveling further to get the material for our compost plant than we would like to be in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy numbers. That's quite something. And I suppose the message to everyone that's listening before we move on is make sure you ask your waste providers for your brown bin and then use it. And Kevin will be very happy. All right. Any final comments there, Kevin? Otherwise, we'll move on to the panel. Great. Okay. So thank you both to Catherine and Kevin. And what we're going to do now is just try and get everybody up on screen. And we can have a conversation, the five of us together. I think Michael's joining as well. So while that's going on in the background, thank you to everyone for the questions that have been coming up. We'll have those as we go through the session now, but with a little bit of trying to get us all not speaking too much at the same time. There has been a specific question, Declan, and some great feedback on your presentation. So thank you for that. But really kind of a specific question to you on, you kind of referenced that Ireland's, and this is from Stephen Perry, you referenced that Ireland is behind the curve. What can they actually do for change? I know you put quite a lot through your presentation there, but in terms of, Stephen was talking about, can you look at the appetite of customers to see how actually keen are they on the circular economy and the thought of it? Are they informed enough? So maybe just one point to take away. What would you say, Declan?
I think the informed piece is probably the biggest hurdle. It's awareness, it's adoption, it's education. It's when you actually start to talk to companies and they stand back and they realize that I've got a truckload of plastic waste and wrappers that I want to get rid of. I don't want all this cardboard waste. I don't want all this plastic waste. I don't want this stuff. So what can I do with it? So I think it's an awareness of what can we do with our on the first step, our waste streams. They don't want it clogging up their shops, their warehouses, their vans and their trucks. So it's an awareness piece of what can we do with all of this stuff.
All of that stuff. And who should they go and talk to?
Who should they go and talk to? Well, you have the various waste organisations. We work closely with East Midlands Waste and Southern Midlands Waste, and they're running a MODUS national programme on the circular economy, sort of looking at resource efficiency, changing customer-supplier relationships, looking at customer and employee engagement strategies, because you'll find a lot of solutions there within your teams, the people that you work with. So go talk to your suppliers, go talk to your customers as a kickoff, and then talk to your local municipalities and waste providers, whether it's AES or Kevin's team company.
Yeah.
Working this. Who do we sort of? So there are solutions out there. You've got the likes of Circulera, as well as an agency that are looking at building out a database, and the Rediscovery Centre looking at building out and the MODUS people as well, building out a source of here's all the different solutions that we can tap into locally in Ireland.
That's brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Declan. And maybe over to you, Catherine. I left you to have a think about that question from Edward. It was yes, from Edward. Just saying, what can small towns or villages do to embrace these ideas? Did you have any thoughts on that?
I think lots, and a lot of it is not about reinventing the wheel. I mean, almost every town in Ireland, regardless of its size, has a Tidy Towns committee of some sort. They've been doing a lot of this stuff for a long time, and we don't necessarily think of it through the lens of sustainability, but that's exactly what it is. People kind of working together, collaborating together, businesses working together, looking at very simple things around waste and how things are managed. So if you somewhere here like Dunfanaghy, where there's a very active Tidy Towns committee and also a Clean Coast committee. So things like, beach cleans, management of waste, litter picks, but also very practical things like local businesses you can go into here with your own containers if you're buying, fresh products, so fresh meat and things, so you're not taking plastic out of the shops. And I think we could all learn a lot from the Burren, for example, who've recently won their global award on the ecotourism side of the house. But what they're doing there is so much broader than tourism. So it's a way of looking at their entire community and how they work together for the betterment of the entire community, and be that through tourism or just people who work there, who work and live there. And I think there's a lot of opportunities here at the moment, particularly now as we see people kind of moving back into rural communities, to really kind of look at this afresh. So I think there's lots of opportunities, actually.
Yeah, definitely. And perhaps, we've talked a lot over the last year with COVID, build back better and make sure that everything is, seen slightly differently. We've all been outside a good bit more and hopefully come in contact with the environment a bit more. But I think the Burren is a great pin-up. It's a great idea, and anyone should sort of, for local areas, look there. They are advanced. That sort of thing doesn't happen overnight. So also think Tidy Towns is really helpful. So thanks, Catherine, for sharing that. A question now perhaps to the whole panel, and I'll start with Michael, because you referred quite a lot, Michael, to policy and disappointing progress on policy over the last maybe 10 years in this space. So I suppose it's sort of putting you on the spot a little bit, but what 2 policy changes at a national level, it can be 2, it could be 3, it could be 1, I'll leave it to you to see what detail you go into, but at a positive, what 2 or 3 policy changes at a national level would help businesses to take sustainability to the next level? So what would you like to see happen? And then I'll open that up to Kevin and to Catherine and to Declan as well. What 2 policy changes would really help your businesses on sustainability? So Michael, maybe if you have a view on that.
Yeah, okay, Caroline. I have the list of who's listening, so there's nobody from the department, and there's no government ministers, and there's no principal officers or secretary generals. I think picking up on what Declan was saying earlier on, and even what Catherine was saying there, I think it's something that will enable. And I can go back when I was a kid in national school, and you had the various caravans that went round about creating awareness about the environment and how we should manage our environment, and it was really getting into that sustainability. How do we sustain? And it was an advance of sort of climate change. And I think there's something more that has to be almost like a horizontal thing that's across all policies, all government departments, all enterprise policy, that this mindset change is built in. So something around that sometimes it can be the carrot, it might be the stick, but there's something in there that it's not just going down to the business, but it's across the community. It's picked up on that question about how do communities do it. So something on that. Specifically to businesses, I think there is to be one, I think any policy has to be for a long term. It can't be a 3-year or a 5-year wonder. And that's what we tend to do at times. This is going to fix everything. I've been around a while and I've seen things come from Europe, and, agri-tourism was going to solve the problems of rural Ireland 25 years ago. Then the next thing came along 5 years later, then something else 5 years later. So I think this thing around sustainability, circular economy, climate change has to be long-term, and therefore it can't be a quick fix. So the policy to support entrepreneurs and enterprises in this space has to be a minimum 10-year cycle. And it has to be around getting that, it's linking the innovation within small business, business management, and sustainability, circular economy. We have just presented our draft for the national plan for the local enterprise offices for the next 5 years or 6 years. So we have actually built in there a clear reference to circular economy and sustainability in there in relation to management capability within it, with micro enterprises that we'd be dealing with. Because again, it was just to get it in there and make sure that's one of the things that we would be tasked with doing, is delivering support programs to business to do that. So to me, there's those 2 things. There's how do you get the mindset and the behavioural change, and then a direct support program over a longer period of time on a sustained basis to smaller micro enterprises.
Those are really clear. Thank you. I think that makes complete sense. So maybe Kevin, over to you. Any policy change that you'd like to see or that you've seen elsewhere that would be very helpful?
I suppose if you go into our industry and you kind of replicate crossing the border, will be a lot more incentives, let's say even there for solar with us. I think the feasibility study we done with solar, I think it'll be maybe a 14 or 15-year payback. We know it would be great, good from a green point of view, but it's very hard to kind of jump the gun and spend that kind of volume of money for the kilowatts we'd need and kind of pull it out over 15 years or something like that. There's some, I think it can replicate some of our kind of counterparts in the north with incentivization, even around like the anaerobic digestion and stuff like that. There's just a bit more incentive to kind of bring it on that wee bit quicker, where just on this side it's just not.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's clear. And Declan, maybe to you, because I think maybe you'd be able to give some insights of policy that might be coming down the tracks. But we've also had a great question from Carleen in the audience, just saying, look, we're a startup. Work in innovation, and we're looking for funding. But government policy is so uncertain; it's undecided, and yet lots of our funding will rely on that for our future business model. And yet they're not quite happy to take it that these policy changes will happen. So, what advice would you give to an innovation startup to develop a business model based on probable but unconfirmed government policy? And is there any policy that you perhaps want to share with the audience?
So last year we had the Waste Action Plan for the Circular Economy. So there is a Irish government policy. So there's Ireland's National Waste Policy. That's all built around the circular economy. So if anybody wants to have a look, it's all in there. Looks at certain sectors. So there is a broader appreciation at a aim and Ryan level that the circular economy is something that Ireland has to sort of waken up. On the policy side of things, if you look at the leaders in the circular economy internationally, the Danes, the Dutch, Finns, the Swedes, they're more progressive in many areas in their thinking and their maturity as a society. And the circular economy and sustainability starts at the children. So education has to start right up where the circular economy is built into how the children go to school and how they bring their lunch, and so the sort of how they manage, sort of bringing their lunch boxes to school, something as simple as that. I think we need to introduce behavioral economics into every course, in every subject, in every school and college, to actually understand how humans behave and how we can actually change people's attitudes and actions. I live in Rathcoton, County Meath, and the amount of waste masks thrown on the ground and rubbish thrown around, I'm just horrified by it. Every one of those is a raw material that could be used for something else. We just don't have the psyche. So education started very young, and it's part of it, part of just how we live and exist sort of with our environment, the people that we engage with. So education, behavioral economics. On the question on the startup front, I ran the Climate Kick Accelerator in Ireland back in 2018, which was funded by the Climate Kick program through European funding. And that supported startup companies on, was there a proposition, a valid proposition? It can be about timing. It can be about the quality of your idea. It can be about is there a customer for my idea? If you're waiting for policy change, you can be a little bit ahead of the curve. The customer mightn't be in Ireland. I don't know what the product is or the service the startup is doing. I always look at from a startup proposition perspective. One, does the idea stack up? But two, does the leadership team, the right type of customer, the networks you engage with, that total proposition piece. And you need to look at your business holistically. I worked with 13 startups in that program, and some of them fell by the wayside because of the leadership and their ability to be able to drive and be a leadership team. And others when there are ideas too early, the technology's not there yet. So it's a very fine balancing act. In terms of funding them, there's a program being run through IMR and Circulera that's funding a program at the moment for 5 startups, and it's challenging the leadership, the business model, the proposition, the customer engagement. And that program has just kicked off about a month ago, and they'll have another cohort in Q3, Q4, another one next year. It's Climate Kick funds startups, but it's putting the companies and their ideas through the ringer. And if it's built on policy, and the customer is the government, then you may be just too early in your journey, or the customer mightn't be in Ireland, and it's still a good idea. So I think it's that customer identification, the customer need, and timing is a big challenge.
Yeah, I think that's really clear, Declan. And Carleen, on your comment, I'd also add to Declan's point there that just make sure you're talking to the right investors and the right funders, that they are up to speed on this concept and that they fully understand. So it's not only informing your customers, but it's informing those that are going to try and, well, you hope, give you money. So if they don't understand, maybe they're not the best fit, and that there are other funders and investors out there that do suit your business model more, and they can challenge it, but also support it by having a longer vision. So I think there is a lot to be done in terms of looking at the horizon and seeing who's the right funder for you and who understands all of this area. Did you have anything you wanted to add there, Catherine, on policy?
No, I'd agree with Michael. It's really important, like a lot of policies, that whatever is announced at whatever time, that it has a long tail on it. It's very hard for people to make business decisions if they feel some sort of incentive is a 2 or 3 year. You know, we're looking at a very long game here. The countries that Declan mentioned that are way ahead of us on this are ahead of us because they took a long-term view on this quite a long time ago, you know, in the overall scheme of things. So, and I think the other thing is just more innovative solutions to retrofit. I mean, and I say this both, you know, for domestic homes and for small businesses, that in reality, we're not going to knock down every house in Ireland and rebuild them. So we need to really look at ways that are win-win for everybody there, both for the construction sector, which is going to need a boost, and for the long-term viability of other businesses. Because even if you look at Kevin's numbers for his payback period, while it may not make sense for him as a standalone business, it may make sense for a broader business community in that area to collaborate on solutions around, for example, solar. So it is about working together. It's all the old reliables are still true with this, you know.
Yeah, and I love that, Catherine. I think that's really important, that collaboration in this is key, because yes, there are elements of sustainability and circular economy that are competitive advantage pieces, absolutely, and they are your IP and really important to your business. But there are definitely elements that you need to collaborate, because you won't make it all on your own. So thank you very much. I think we're running out of time now, but there's one other just comment from Anna in the Q&A function. Is it possible to organise a Donegal directory of businesses that want to collaborate or meet to discuss ways forward? Personally, I find it very hard to meet like-minded business people in the field. Thank you. So Anna, on that note, and with huge thanks to the panel, I'll hand over to Michael. He'll probably be able to answer that question and to wrap up the session. So thank you very much, Catherine, Kevin and Declan, and over to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Caroline. And just in response to that question from Anna Good, yes, and I mean, I think it's possible. We would be happy to work with you and others to try and facilitate that, whether it be on a formal basis, but at least have 1 or 2 meetings, because it probably generally takes more than 1 meeting to get these things going. So we'd be happy to sit down with you and talk about that. I mean, as you know, we have a peer learning model that we've been running out in Donegal now for the last 12 years. So we're just running out a new one on the food sector. So again, it's in the context of food where we've come into this space. So that is absolutely a possibility. Few takeaways from my perspective. I think that figure that Declan gave us there, that we're about 2% in our economy is circular compared to about 6 or 7% internationally, shows, as some of the panelists were saying, how far we are behind at this point in time. And I'm not too sure myself whether that's a function of both either lack of market-driven demand or a lack of policy thought, or maybe a bit of both. Because I think in all cases and I think Catherine's case study is an example of somebody has done this, gone into that area of sustainability, but also positioned her product where she gets the return. I think that's an important thing as well, because ultimately it is about bottom line for the businesses. And I think when it makes business sense, more and more businesses will get into it. And I think, again, picking up what Caroline and Declan was saying, made the point earlier on, that innovation inextricably linked with sustainability and the circular economy, and how the two work together, and how they can work to produce product, new ideas and new businesses. I think, again, those 7 principles, or 5 principles, sorry, that Declan mentioned about, zero mindset, limitless thinking, think infinity, be more linked to nature, more like nature and biology, and think in systems, and it's new thinkings and not models. And I think a lot of the time we in the public sector tend to look for the models as opposed to the thinkings. We like to think that, just what's the model, what's the business model here, and it's about how you're going to make the money. I think it all comes down to a lot of what we talked about. One was awareness, and then the knowledge and the skills. And that's probably why we are that bit behind other European countries. Again, from our experience in the Sensei project, at least from those European countries, and primarily Eastern Europe we're working with, they have the same challenge. And as Declan was saying, it tends to be the Northern Europeans tend to be the Dutch and the Danes and the Swedes and the Norwegians. So I think we can learn from those. And I'm just reading this morning, our Institute of Technology in Letterkenny actually have just been successful in 2 European projects, and they're tying in with a couple of regions in those Nordic countries. So I think that, and it's around crisis and opportunity. So I think we'll be able to tie into there. And I think we have found in the Sensei project and in ourselves in the local enterprise office, there are people like, EnviroGrind and Catherine, and one of them I mentioned there, Origin Green. There's a company down in Killybegs, Island Seafood's been a sort of whole sustainability initiative with them. I mean, I think Origin Green is a good website to go to because you can see what other businesses in the food sector, manufacturing have done on that sustainability. But I know because we took another group of European partners down to them in Killybegs. One of the things they've done, they put in their own hydropower. So I think about 65% of their energy is coming from hydropower. They put in a new rainwater system, so it now becomes standard, I think, in a lot of food productions. So there are case studies there. Sometimes it's hard to find them, but there's more and more happening in that sector. And again, it's about raising the awareness. And it's getting my thinking going, maybe that's another sector, rather than a sector, but maybe a horizontal thing we should be looking at now in the local enterprise office in Donegal. That whole sustainability agenda becomes now part of programs and supports and mentoring and training and management development, that it's not here's a circular economy program, but here is something that's brought in across the board. I think was mentioned there by Declan as well. So that's kind of what I'm taking away from it. But I think the other, just small things I think as well, because I think the practicality things are the thing that a lot of business people like. And I think, Caroline, you touched on it, Declan touched on it, I think Catherine touched on it. Things like talking to your staff, talking to your customers, and talking to your suppliers. A lot of basic fundamental business principles that a lot of the time that we forget about, but apply even to the whole circular economy and the sustainability agenda. You start with the basics. If you're talking to your suppliers and your customers, there's a good basis there to start, and to use that to inform your decision making, as opposed to just reading something or saying this has been forced to do, therefore I'm just going to do it, but to inform your decision before you actually to take a decision. So that's just some of the stuff that I've learned. I think from us in the local enterprise office, we've a long way to go, I think, in our knowledge and skills, but we're on this journey. And again, picking up on Anna Good, we'd be delighted to try and facilitate a greater awareness in Donegal around this topic. Just to finish, I'd like to thank all our speakers this morning. Caroline for emceeing and for contributing, to Declan Bogan and Declan for responding so quickly to me whenever I reached out to you. Again, it was an interesting challenge for us to find speakers. You're looking on a website and you're scrolling around and you're looking to see, and you see, and we had a few other companies we were trying to get as well, to get a mix of outside Donegal, but unfortunately they just weren't available. I know that to Kevin and to Catherine, I mean, Kevin's dad came to us at the outset many years ago, so for that mobile shredder was the first bit of equipment I think we would have granted in there. So it's been a long journey as well with Martin and his wife Mary. Also, I'd just like to thank AVC again this morning for our AV system here, and thankfully our builders on site weren't too noisy here this morning for us. And then my own team, Brenda, Maura, Eileen and Yvonne, who have been both Brenda contributing and then my own staff here. You'll have seen them there on the online and responding to you. Just one last thing then. For our contributors this morning, you will get this. I think it's more or less a kind of a green bucket list. You'll get this it's a small little token from ourselves. Each speaker during Enterprise Week will get this Donegal bucket list. So it's a list of things to do on a monthly basis in Donegal. So you can in January you can go down for a dip in Marble Hill if you're up to it. But I think my daughter sent me something. That's a system actually getting of plunging yourself into cold water to some mad boy that does all these adventure stuff. That's a system now that people buy into. You can climb Errigal in August, or you can Ballymastoker Bay in October, and you can finish up in Irish Forest Park in December. So it's just a little token from ourselves, done by a local artist, and Laura Buchanan down in Melton. So just something as a memento of your contribution for Enterprise Week 2021. So thank you all. Thank you all who have logged in. And I would just probably in the context of this morning's discussion draw your attention in particular to Friday's session around innovation. So to collaborate, to compete. So it's around innovation, but it's focusing on that area we touched on there about collaboration and how we can work together to be innovative, both within our businesses and within our communities and within our county. So I would just suggest that as a follow-up to this morning's session. So again, thank you all very much, and thank you for your time.